Hi team. This is a super quick video just to talk about displaying images. I know it's something that everybody ends up wanting to do. It's also something that you'll end up probably working out for yourself anyway, but just in case, here's me talking about it as well. Really the best thing about images is that you can get complicated visual information, stuff on your canvas without attempting to create the entire thing out of rectangles and ellipses and Bezier curves and all of those sorts of things, all of which can draw great things, as you've seen for yourself, but it's very time consuming and takes a lot of lines of code to draw something complicated. A lot of the time what we actually just want is an image. It's how the world works, right? We're in an image-infested society or something like that. I'm going to stop talking about that. So, images are thankfully pretty simple to get working in our code. Over here I've got just a standard template project where I'm going to display an image in a moment, but I want to point you to the reference in this case. So if we go over to here, we've got the p5js.org reference open, and it has a section, you may already have seen it, called image here. And if I click on that, you can see there's a bunch of mostly functions that relate to images. I'm not going to go into very much of this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on this one here, the image function. That really does, the key thing is going to explain how we load an image into our program and how we then display that image on the canvas of our program. All of this other stuff is interesting too, but it's very inside baseball. You should feel free to investigate it and ask questions as needed. So let's go look at image. Immediately we can see that what image does is it loads an image and displays it on the canvas. We are not at all surprised, and we can see that doing this is made up of kind of three key steps if we're looking at this example here. The first step is that we need a variable that we're going to store the image inside. They've called their one img, which stands for image, presumably in reference to the HTML tag img. I don't think that's a very good name for a variable to store an image in. Really, it should describe what the image is actually of. So you can see that their image here is apparently of La Défense, although I can't really completely understand that by looking at it. That's fine. So really this maybe should have been called La Défense image or something like that. So step one is a variable to store the image. Step two, you can see that they've got a new function here that we haven't been using, which is called preload. And this is the special function that is run or is called before setup. So before your program does anything, this function called preload would be called, and that is the place that we can load various files. In this instance, most obviously that's images, but it could be sounds as well, for example. Anything that might take a little bit of time to load, we put it in here because that way the program doesn't start before things are ready. So preload is the place to load some of our larger assets, and you can see that in preload there's this special line here that loads the image and stores it into the variable img. And the special function that does that is called load image. It's a good name for it. It loads images. And you can see that inside the parentheses for load image, its argument, the thing that it gets told so that it can do its job, is the location of the image to load. That location is relative to the project. So you would have an assets folder, and then inside that assets folder you would have ladefense.jpg, a JPEG image. You can see that here they've put that path inside single quotes. You could put it inside double quotes as well, or you could put it inside backticks with a template string. That's kind of up to you. What load image will do is it will go find that file, load it, and store it inside the variable called img. What preload is doing is it's making sure that all of these jobs, you could load more than one image, making sure that all of them get loaded before the rest of the program runs. And here they're displaying the image inside their setup function. And they do that very simply by saying image. That's the function that displays an image, just like rect is the function that displays a rectangle. And you give it three pieces of information. You give it the variable that contains the image that you want to display, img, and then you give it a position. Where do you want to display it? 0, 0. It means the top left corner. Images get drawn just like rectangles based on their top left corner. So with that information, we can go and draw an image of our own. So I'm going to head back over here. So in the template project, because I am a wonderful person, I have already put an image for us to use. So in the assets folder, there is an images folder, as we can see here. In the images folder, there is something called clown.png. That is an image of a clown. It looks like that. Beautiful. It's my favorite emoji. So that's what we're going to use to load and display in this little example. Let's do this. So the first thing that we needed to remember was a variable to store it in. I'm going to create a variable called clown image. I'm not going to store anything in it. That's why I'm just writing let clown image and then a semicolon, because we know that we're actually going to load the image into this inside this function called preload. So this is enough to create our variable to store it in. Then I need to add the preload function to my program like this. So now I've got the special function preload. P5 just knows about it because of its name. We're going to make sure that we get its name right. Preload, all lowercase. And this will get called before my program starts, before even setup gets called. And then the next thing that I needed to do was that I needed to assign into my clown image variable with the equal sign there, the result of saying load image, which is the function that loads images, and then in quotation marks, I'm going to use double quotation marks, I say the path to the image I want to load, which is in the assets folder. And then I say / because I'm going to specify the next part of the path. Inside that assets folder is the images folder, / inside that images folder is a file called clown.png, like that. So that's saying load the file at this location and store it into my clown image variable. Okay, so at that point, we're all ready. The clown will be loaded by the time we get to setup, so let's just write a simple program. Create canvas. Let's make a canvas that is an inventive 500 by 500 pixels. Here, let's draw the background. Let's make the background black just for the sake of it. And then we want to display our image. So to begin with, let's just display our image at image. Remember, we write image, which is the function that displays images, just like rect displays rectangles. And we say the variable that's got my image in it, that's the one that I want to display. And where do I want to display it? I'll display it at 0, 0, the top left corner. So if I save that and I go and look at my, I think I actually have to run my little thing before this will work. So I'm going to start my server. Hey presto, the clown face. And you can see, by the way, that the PNG had transparency there, and that transparency is respected. So we can see the curve. We can see the background through the curve of the clown's face. The clown is being drawn at position 0, 0, which is good. That's where I wanted it to be drawn. If I wanted my clown to be drawn at the location of the mouse, I could, instead of drawing at 0, 0, do it at mouse X, mouse Y. We know about that. That's a classic. And now it follows my mouse, and again you can see that the top left corner of the image is being drawn at the position of my mouse, because you can see my cursor there. So images really are drawn just in the same way as a rectangle, right? And like an image is kind of our rectangle, so it's not too surprising. Even if this clown looks circular, the image itself is still rectangular. If I wanted to draw the clown at the center instead of at its top left corner, you might imagine, and you might be correct, that there is something called image mode, which works just the same way as the rectangle. If I say image mode center, now the clown is drawn with its cute little button nose right underneath my cursor. So now the clown is centered. This is really just about all there is to it. You can see how this is working. We just need a variable with an image in it, which we load with load image in the preload function, and we need to display it with the image function when we want to display it. The other thing that you might want to know, although this gets into weird territory, is that if you add 2 more numbers here after the position of the image that you're displaying, such as what? 100, no, that's going to be too small, too big. Let's say 50, 50. This would specify that you could scale the image down by this, so 50, 50. So it's going to make it 50 pixels by 50 pixels instead of whatever it actually is. So you can see now the clown is much smaller. Good. That's a thing that we can do. These things don't have to be equal, so we could also scale this thing to 200 by 25, for example. So it's going to be 200 pixels wide, 25 high. Then we get this kind of nice, ooh, that's actually quite good, kind of creepy, bit cursed. We get it scaled in this way, so its y has been scaled to be smaller than its x, and so forth. I mean, this is, at this point, I think you understand how this works, right? So we can specify the dimensions of the image. One thing I would just like to warn you against is, even though you can control the scale of the image here, and sometimes that is the right thing to do, it's almost always better to to create the image itself at the correct scale rather than scaling it in your program. This is particularly true because I would say that it's a very good idea to avoid having extremely large images in your project. For one thing, obviously they take up a lot of space, which is not good if somebody has to download them to see your project. And that's just a bad thing. They can also make your program run more slowly. So if you're thinking of working with a giant image, I really recommend scaling it down to a manageable size before you actually include it in your project. That's just a piece of wisdom from me to you. There are more things that you can do with images. We saw that there were other functions in the reference. There's even other weird ways of using this image function that you can take a look at. But this is the basic principle. You create a variable that you're going to store your image in. You load the image into that variable inside a preload function, and you display the image by using the image function, maybe scaling it, maybe not, and specifying where you want to draw it. That's really all there is to it. So do have fun with that. Do spare yourself the trouble of drawing things out of ellipses and rectangles if you're finding that painful. On the other hand, please don't feel obliged to use images. Some really, really beautiful abstract work can be achieved, especially by just drawing things with rect and ellipse and curves and so forth. So don't give up on that necessarily. Okay, that's images. That is how you draw them. Make sure that you don't put in images that are too massive, and enjoy your images for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. See you next time.